Hi all, it's Cristy from those Tweens and Teens. Hope everyone is doing great. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about 13 reasons why. I've had a bit of a crazy day today, but I am going to invite my amigo Ludo. Give me a second because I'm learning to do this, so give me just a sec here. Hi Ludo, there he is. I'm going to join him and see if this works for us. Ludo, let's see if we can join together here and have this crazy conversation about 13 reasons why. Hi Melanie, how you doing? I know you have your own tween that we'll talk about. Hey, there you are.
Go. I'm sorry, I'm a little late.
No, that's okay. We're just getting started. Hi everyone, it's Cristy Clavijo-Kish from Miami, and I've got Ludo Gabriele, Mr. French. He makes everything look better and sound better because, you know, he's French, so it's just automatically better. So Ludo, we're joining each other for the first time. I'm very excited to have this conversation, or I wouldn't say that we're excited. I'd say that we're concerned, but I'm excited about partnering with Ludo for the conversation from a male perspective. I think so often we talk specifically about moms and you know, just moms have these conversations, and more it's so important to make sure that we involve dads as we co-parent, right? And we raise all these amazing children and make sure that they're successful. So Ludo, who has his wife, Diana, who's amazing, and she is traveling. He has been a lone dad for the last 2 days.
Yes, I've been alone with the two, but, you know, I'm lucky enough to have a support system with my in-laws that are very close by. So that's why, you know, the little one is downstairs right now. And the big one is asleep. So, you know, we should have a quiet session.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So this is our first time. Angie on our team just shared Ludo's article that he wrote all about the masculine side about this conversation. And I wanted to take us for a step back just for a minute. Look at Diana. Yes, he's a rock star. You have your own fan club here, Ludo.
Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly. But so last season with 13 Reasons Why, we had a very good conversation with Lina Costa Sandal, which many of you may know. Lina is our ongoing partner, and she's a therapist here in Miami. She has the site, the site and the actual physical location called Stop Parenting Alone. And we had a really touching conversation because the reality is that this show really can rock you to the core. It really did for me as a mother of twin teens. I can tell you that for me, it was eye-opening. And I thought that I do have a great conversation with my daughters, and yet definitely it was eye-opening for me to just watch and see what other kids are experiencing in families and what they're going through. And my heart went with the mom, you know, and well, the parents in general of Hannah Baker, who's the teen who commits suicide in the program. So we're gonna fast forward. We're welcome. We're gonna share the link about our first video, and so now we're gonna come to season 2. And actually, it's amazing. I saw the news that it's been actually extended for a season 3, and so I've been binge watching after I saw Ludo's article to make sure that I got as caught up as I could on the second season. And I have 2 teenage girls, which don't necessarily have a huge interest in watching it, funny enough, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But for me, as a mom, it has been really eye-opening to continue seeing what's going on, what they're talking about, and just make myself mindful. So we're going to go with that through like a couple of scenarios and conversations. Ludo, I don't know if you want to jump in and add anything about why this topic is so important to you. I particularly loved your article, so I wanted you to be able to touch base.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it and to share about this show that is truly it is heartbreaking, but I think it is definitely important to watch. And before I start on how and why this show is important to me, I want to also highlight the fact that my wife does not want to watch it. She hasn't watched it yet because obviously this is a very heavy subject, not one that we want to watch as an entertainment, especially when it's I mean, it's a show, so you have episodes, and it's
Right.
good that it is heavy. But I feel it's important that, especially as we talk about it, because if you're watching this live right now, chances are that you know what the show is about, and it's the premise of it is about suicide. But the cause of the suicide of Anna Baker obviously starts with a picture of her that circulates on the internet, where she is shown in a way where that suggests that she would be how can we say, loose or easy to have sex with. And this is a behavior that is obviously triggered by guys, because Anna Baker in the movie is heterosexual, even though she does have a few homosexual encounters, even though they are very succinct. But regardless, I think the show is obviously very important about the way boys, teenage boys, behave at school and among themselves. And we can definitely see clear themes that touch on toxic masculinity and all of the attributes of the man box. So that's why I think when we see those boys very, very popular on one side, athletic, we sense that there is a big sense of entitlement among those boys, and obviously they kind of reflect those ideals, that outdated ideals, that what a guy should be, the womanizer one. And I think, and for me, this is important because this is the cause of what starts the whole story. It's toxic behavior of a teenage boy and of teenage boys, because even though there is specific occurrences, we can see that a lot of boys are not behaving appropriately with Anna Baker. So that's
right. And
important for me.
Right. Well, and what I think is so amazing about that is that we often hear, and I see your comments of not everybody's watched the show. So we'll try not to have too many spoilers. We're really talking around the themes, right? The key themes. And you do, I would say, Melanie, you really do have to emotionally prepare. My husband watched it the other day for the first time, and he caught it in the middle, and he was like, wow, I don't know that I'm ready for this. So I think it's kind of interesting. I'm like, you don't have a choice. You have two 16-year-olds. Get ready. Like, we're in the middle of it. So you really don't have time.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did want to, what I thought was so amazing about bringing Ludo to the conversation when I read his post was the need for the boy parents, right? Not just the moms, to take responsibility for the boy side of the conversation, because so often we focus on the girls and the girls and the girls, and we have to take care of the girls, and the girls are vulnerable, and I know I have two of them, but it's so important. I loved your post because it's important to take responsibility for that masculinity, for the atmosphere that's created in the high school between the athletes and the non-athletes, and even the boys that are bullied. It's important for parents of boys to be involved in making sure that we're not continuing to promote those issues without even realizing it, because there's so many themes in just even older movies from the 80s. I know you touched on The Sandlot. I thought was really interesting. But even movies, that are just a little bit older do push those kinds of themes on boys. So I definitely want to get there and come back. So make sure that everybody has your questions ready definitely from a male perspective. I think that the conversation's a great conversation. But one of the things that I wanted to start with in our conversation was a key theme throughout the show, which really just, hi, Elena, and hi, Claudia. I didn't get to say hi to you earlier. One of the key themes that I thought is so important, and there's so much news right now about suicide, unfortunately, with the loss of Kate Spade and Andy Bourdain. are we really talking to our children, right? And what I love about also Ludo being on board with us today is that it starts so much earlier. I can say that my 16-year-olds, that I have a very strong communication pattern with them, but I started that when they were 3, 2, 3 years old. And not that it's a lost cause if you haven't started early, but I do think that creating and fostering that conversation, that ability to have a conversation, is at the central core, because so many of those parents say over and over again in that show that they didn't know, or they weren't clear, or that they didn't hear about it. And it's that central theme of communication. So I definitely wanted you to, I have lots to say about that, but I wanted you as a dad to be able to touch on the why communication is so important, even from early on.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can tell you, just to give a little bit of context to everybody. So my son, I have 2 children. My son is 7 years old, and my daughter is 1, so she's out of the picture for this conversation. But already with my son, what I've noticed is that I can tell when something is wrong because I know him. But if I do not ask question, he would not tell me. And what I've noticed also is that depending on how I come off when I ask the question, if I look concerned, if I look upset, or if there is an emotion that triggers him, right away he's gonna shut down, and he's not gonna tell me. So
right.
He's 7, so nothing major happened at school, but you can have a boy that pick on him and things of that nature. And I could tell, for a little while last year, for example, that something was wrong. But it took me a while to get there and to really have him open up with me. The way I managed to get through was basically to put myself in his shoes and just share my story as a 7-year-old. So the way I manage to really know what's going on with my son is by starting my sentences by, when I was 7, or when I was your age, just like you, this is what happened to me. And when I say that, he kind of relates to me much more, because, he no longer sees me as a 34-year-old dad. He sees me as a 7-year-old boy. And when I'm able to relate my experience as a 7-year-old, when I felt that I was ashamed to say something to my moms or my parents, or something that was painful to me I couldn't express, I felt that when I really put myself on that situation again and share with him, he opens up much easier. It's much easier for him to share on that moment. And that's why I think, but it's important is that even at that age already, they feel a disconnect with us,
Absolutely.
And
it only gets worse.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit sad, but unfortunately, right now I found that trick that I think would help me for maybe the next couple of years. Then I'll have to adjust and make sure I listen. We've talked previously, Cristy, but also as parents and as entrepreneurs, being busy and not paying attention to signs like this is also something that is important. And it's important that we are mindful of making time to be present, but to be present fully, and that's our signs, I think.
And thank you for sharing that. And what I meant, Diana, that it only gets worse, meaning that they get smarter, right? And they think that they know more than anything in the world, and that you're out of touch. I mean, I tend to be an ounce cooler, like you moms, because we're on social media, right? And so that gives us a little bit of an edge, only because we know what's going on, or we know what their social media is about. But the one thing that I would say, and again, it's a theme throughout the program, and Claudia is on, and she has a son. And I know that boys can be, more closed off even than girls. But the one thing that I did learn from Lena, and it's a tip that I wanted to, the gap gets wider, as Elena says. The tip that I did want to share from the last conversation that we had with Lena was creating a safe zone. So many things that I've seen in the show, and it's made me think as a parent in my communication style with my girls, is, am I being judgmental? So they're saying something to me, right? And the first thing that I'm like, oh my God, that's ridiculous, right? And I've had to learn to check my attitude at the door and make sure that I'm not being judgmental, that they always feel that my home is a safe zone, right? And even, are there moments, you know, is it the trip to the grocery store? Is it the time that you drive together to school? Is it Saturday mornings for coffee? Like, is there a moment that you've set out to say, this is a safe moment, I'm not judging you, I just want you to talk to me? And if it's not you, because sometimes it's like teaching your kids piano. I knew piano for years, and when I tried to teach my daughters, I'm like, you don't know how to play piano, we can't learn from you. So sometimes it's also about checking, about removing yourself and creating somebody of trust that they feel comfortable talking to, that may not be the parent. And that's why I love working with Angie as my partner on Los Tweens, because she's not a mom, she's an aunt, right? She's a super aunt, and she's a person of trust. And so if there's one thing that I could say throughout the themes of the program, is make sure that you check your attitude and your judgment at the door. And when they're saying something to you, be actually ready to listen, which is really hard. It's not easy, right? It's definitely not easy, but, you know, creating that safe zone for them to actually tell you things. And then aside from that, if it's not you, then who is it? You know, is it that aunt? Is it an uncle? Is it, you know, maybe it's somebody at school, but somebody that you would be able to connect with, that would tell you honestly what's going on with your child, if maybe you don't have the opportunity to see that. So that was something, if I shared anything, that was, you know, one thing I wanted to make sure that, you know, everybody took away. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Well, no, I mean, you said it all, and it's true that during the show, you know, the notion of secrecy is widely developed, you know, within, you know, from the relationship between parents and children. You have also secrecy at school, and we can find teenagers that just feels at a point of desperation and loneliness, that they
Yes.
simply cannot share. And that cultural secrecy, you have it even in the app they use, you know, Snapchat. It's something that you send that disappear. So I think it's very much also in the culture.
Right.
Maybe it's also because, you know, in social media, everything is so public and so out there all the time, that maybe they feel that they need to be private, and their authentic self is not maybe something that is appropriate to share. So that's something that I've thought about as well. But I mean, I think you basically covered everything.
And a funny thing that my mom would tell me, because my mom, she didn't really want me to tell her about, you know, sex or any of those things, right? She's a Latina mom through and through, right? But at the same time, she always established the fact that mejor que lo sepa yo antes que lo sepa más nadie, right? So she made it that even though she didn't want to know, she didn't want me to lie. And if she found out about the lie, that was worse than anything else, right? So at a minimum, it was that create that safe zone. And again, that one theme throughout the show, hi Abesha, is that the parents kept on saying that I just don't know, and there's that culture of secrecy. So if you can create that safe zone as your home, and as it's an open door, and I trust you that you may not want to hear it, right? There are some things that I've heard watching the show and then asking my girls questions. There's been a lot of things that I've been like, really, that's what's going on? And so I'm trying not to be out of touch and I'm asking questions. But when you're asking the questions, that means you need to be open to hearing the actual comments, right? And so try to put as much of a face as you possibly can, because it will surprise you, you know, some of the information. So I wanted to touch on the going back to the boys, right? And the raising of boys. And we have some, you know, boy parents and moms with us here today. So I definitely wanted to, how do you, I can touch on the girl, you know, side, but how is it that we start breaking that mold of the issues of masculinity means, you know, winning over women, means being the womanizer? How do we break through that? But how do we help our teens get through it? Because that is an essential message in the program as well.
Well, what I would say is, number one, as a dad and as a man, you need to do some deep introspection of how you perceive women and how you've been raised, and how male ideals are presented. Because I would not take a lot of risk by saying, I mean, maybe now it's changing a little bit with, you know, with the Me Too movement, with everything that has been happening. But the vast majority of male have been raised under the ideals that have been the same for generations, you know. Right. And I think before, you know, being able to help our children and our boys, we need to kind of bring to the surface our unconscious bias and the way we've been raised and with the way we've been influenced. So I've done this work myself. It's not an easy one. Sometimes it really catches you by surprise when you kind of, you know, go deep within yourself and see how what you value in life, what you've been valuing, how do you place yourself as a man in the world, you know, how do you measure success? When I stopped working, I mean, when I stopped, you know, my corporate work, and I found myself for the first time not making an income and being a caregiver for a little bit, I definitely questioned my masculinity. I was like, oh my God, I'm 31. I've always made money. I don't make money right now. It's been 2 months. What's going on with me? And when you start unpacking those things, and when you start, you know, really see how nasty stereotypes and what we call the man box has been influenced your entire life, that's how you start to kind of revisit who you are and what kind of men you want to be and what kind of boys you want to raise. So I think that's a very important step first, because if we want to raise healthy boys, we need to be healthy ourselves. So this is the step one. And then it's really kind of other than what has been influencing you. So for example, the media. When I grew up in a pretty tough environment with my, you know, I grew up in a project, so it was a very hyper masculine environment around my friends. So I had to be tough and everything. And the male ideals that were around at that time, they were not, you know, I mean, a lot of my friends, you know, we were listening to a lot of hip hop. So, you know, movies like Scarface, that becomes the man, you know. So the guy has money, he's a drug dealer, he has all of the women he wants, and a lot of men consider, you know, that being the key measure of success, and that's what is being presented, you know, to the public at different levels. But this is just a reality, and as a proof of what I'm talking about right now, just let's see who is the president of the United States currently. You would definitely see all of the attributes of toxic masculinity. And then in terms of really talking to our sons and parenting them, I think the number one thing, that the key component of raising healthy boys is simply the way you behave at home, you know. So if the boys, your son, sees you engage at home, you know, doing house chores, being involved at school, things of that nature, you basically modeling what a man is supposed to be. And that's only one part of the equation. The second part of the equation is what kind of talk do you have when you have your friends around, you know. I have my guy friends around. So if you're around friends and you're talking about, you know, women or things of that nature, you got to be careful in the way you talk about them, because you're watching. He's definitely watching you. You know, sometimes I have poker nights in my home, and Zoe's here, and he's watching and he's listening everything that is being said. So I think just behavior and the way you act is important. And one of the last point I would mention, because my son is 7, so he's not at that place yet where he's dating or anything like that. I think it's media monitoring. So you mentioned the Sandlot, and that's an example that I want to give because it's I think it's pretty insightful. So I was watching the Sandlot with my son, and there is a scene where there's 2 teams of baseball. They are all boys, and they basically insult each other back and forth. And one of the two that is arguing is saying, "You play ball like a girl," and everybody stopped talking, and it's basically perceived as the ultimate insult. So when I was watching that with Enzo. I had to tell him, this is not an okay thing to say, and I had to explain why, you cannot say that, and girls are not weaker than boys, and that was a very important moment because he understood it right away. And when we have other occurrences, when we watch other shows, he knows that and he sees it now. And I'm grateful that I was, able to watch the movie with him and to unpack it right away so that it does not create from very early on a stereotype that can be much, much more harmful in the future.
All right. That's awesome. Thank you for those insights. One thing that I wanted to share too is I actually asked my daughters, and I thought it was interesting their perspective as to whether they liked or they didn't like the show. And I found it interesting that one wants to be a filmmaker and one wants to be a doctor because I have identically different twins. And I thought it was interesting their perspective of, and I want to make sure I say this because people are like, well, is it really realistic, right? Is the show realistic? And the important thing is that we're really showing the just teenage life, right? And some of the pressures that we assume that they're not having, right? Because if you have a home and you have a what is quote unquote a safe home, you're not assuming that these things are happening to them. So in general, I like it because it's just making me think and ask them more questions than I would normally ask them. On the other hand, they're saying that there couldn't possibly be that many mean kids in one school, right? So I thought it was kind of interesting, their perspective of, I just don't feel that it's realistic because could there be that many people who could be that mean to each other in one school? What I take from it is just a learning, right? And I thought that recent research that I've seen shows that Gen Z is actually the loneliest generation. So while they're the most connected generation, right, because they are completely being raised in the age of internet and social media and all that kind of stuff, they see so much of like when I wasn't invited to a party, I didn't know because I wasn't on social media, right? But they do know, and it's isolating, and they feel that they're left out when they're not part of it, and that's what triggers a lot of the issues of the bullying and the hurting each other is the things that the kids were seeing that were happening on social media, and the original spreading of the news about Hannah that caused her to already be known as the slut and the loose girl and what have you were because of social media. So I've taken away from it that we do, we talk a big game about having times where we have no social media or that we're connected as a family. Again, going back to the issue of communication, I can't stress it more that having that safe zone in terms of communication and also having moments where you're just not going to be connected and you're going to walk away from that social media is something that you, as a parent of teenagers, be dedicated to it. And we get so busy and we are guilty ourselves of being on the phone and being distracted and not being in the moment. But that is one of the key things that I came away from it was the social media harm, the good and the harm, right, that it can do, because when used in good, the way that Elena's daughters use social media, it's done for good, right? So when it's used in the right way, of course, it has its points. But for the average day and the average teenager in the average home going to high school, it can be harmful. And so I definitely walk away from the show knowing that you need moments of walking away from technology, of having downtime, and having real communication in your family, because the lack of communication is definitely at the heart. I don't know if you wanted to touch on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, for social media, obviously, you were talking about the stat of the Gen Z, the most lonely generation. My take on it is that even though there's a lot of social media, it's also the Instagram generation. So everything that you share is not authentic, or most of the thing that you share is not. So I think this culture of fakeness, this culture of filter, creates anxiety, and that's why a lot of teens, they just feel lonely, and they feel that what they share publicly is not authentic anyway, because what is authentic, or what is being popular, let's say on social media, is not necessarily authentic. So that's one of the first thing I want to say. I think social media definitely, it's good for you. I mean, if it's used for good, it can be amazing. But unfortunately, I think there is a culture right now that really predominates, where everything is so superficial. And I think that's why loneliness is created. When you have a popular friend that has thousands of likes on Facebook because he or she is pretty, and if you post a picture of yourself and you have maybe a few number of likes, that really, I think, take your self-esteem, and that's how loneliness is created. That's the first point. And the second point I wanted to bring up is, it's not really it's not really about social media, but you talked about how Anna is being seen as being loose, and as being, you have a lot of slut shaming going around, and you'll know that the boys don't have that problem.
Right.
The boys, when the boy is popular, when he's scoring, when the more he has, the more it is. So if there is a rumor about him on social media about scoring a lot of chicks, chances are, his street cred is gonna go high. So that's also the thing that is a key example of toxic masculinity at work, and patriarchy, actually. When you see the difference and between the same act and just the gender not being treated the same.
I actually thought one of the lines that I appreciated so much, and it was delivered by one of the boys who had been who actually was the popular kid and he said it himself. The line was amazing, and unfortunately he's gone down a path of drugs, and so you could see how one life could just unramble in a matter of months for this very popular boy. But what he said was so amazing, which was is very well written. The fact that he says one of the boys is feeling that he was in love with Hannah, and he's feeling, how could she have slept with this other boy instead of me, right, for the first time? And the whole slut shaming thing is happening. And what I thought was so amazing, that the other boy says, how is it that when the more conquests we have, the better we are, the more popular we are, and the more that the girls have, we immediately slut shame them. And I, of course, as a woman, I've thought of these things and what have you, but until that culture changes, which I believe that the show is like, if you take a step back of what truly scares you as a parent of teenagers in particular, and take off that filter, right? And challenge yourself to listen to the messages that are on there. What I thought was amazing was, here's this 16-year-old supposedly saying, well, that's pretty much a double standard, because for us, it's really cool the more girls we have, and for her, you're calling her a slut. Why? Because she's the girl. So I've always tried to, yes, the girls need to have that messaging of be secure in who you are. You don't need a boy or a girl to make yourself strong, but that's across both. That goes across what the show is doing, is it's kind of neutralizing the fact that we just need to be self-aware, and we need to be talking, and we need to have self-confidence in who we are, whether you're a boy or a girl. And that's what I thought was very interesting about that whole line, is that it's causing those conversations that I haven't really seen a show tackle those kinds of themes before.
No, I think not in that way, and definitely not grouping all of those they are all key themes that are extremely, relevant right now. I mean, they've always been relevant, but right now there's a lot of media attention around it. So that's why obviously the show is important. And what you were talking about also about slut shaming. I mean, what's interesting is, can I do some spoiler alert or something like this? Because I mean, there is a very key example. I think it's important. It's at the end when the judge gives his verdict. He gives some kind of I mean, it's outrageous, the moral equivalency that he gives about the rapist and the victim, because he basically a slap on the wrist, and he's basically saying, I want those two young people to take a deep look on about their lives. And fuck, I'm sorry, I mean, pardon my French, but I mean, and the rape.
Right.
And also, when we talk about rape, often we talk to the passive one. Anna has been raped, and we should not say that Bryce raped Anna, or she, and that kind of passiveness also create what we call victim shaming, especially women, So I think those, and the fact that the judge that represents the ultimate authority, when you see a verdict like that, and especially when you express those words, when I was watching it, I was like, get out of town. But when you transcribe that to real life events, you will see that happens every day, especially if you're a white male wealthy. If you rape a girl, you're gonna get away with it. I mean, maybe now a little bit, not as easily, but Brock Turner, I mean, look at it. Look at the story. If you take the story of Brock Turner, it's the same story as Bryce. It's exactly the same. So to the question, is the show realistic? Unfortunately, it is realistic,
Right. So with that, I know there's so much to talk about the show. Again, as parents, I know that it's hard, and it's probably, as my girls say, probably over dramatizing, because how many bad people could there be in one school? But nonetheless, I think that it's eye-opening. I would definitely, maybe if you feel uncomfortable because maybe your teen's a little bit younger, watch it on your own. And I've actually watched it on my own. I actually wanted to watch it on my own. I didn't really want to watch it with my daughters, because I kind of wanted to be ready for how I was going to react. And the scenes are graphic. There are some scenes that are very graphic, and they will scare the hell out of you as a parent. But what I think it does do, especially for parents of younger kids, right? I almost feel like I wish I had seen it earlier, right? Because it almost is like it prepares you, things that you need to be aware of, questions that you need to be asking. I mean, if your child is going into a new school, don't take it for granted that the school is going to tell you what's going on. You still have to be involved. You still have to be asking questions. You still have to be connecting with other parents. That was one of the biggest things, that I walked away from. Don't assume that the school is going to call you and tell you everything, because they're probably not, So that was kind of interesting.
They often also protect the popular boys, I mean, you have all of this, I mean, do not underestimate the power of popularity of boys, especially if they are athletes. Especially, if they have money, that's another factor as well. So you also, when we were talking about secrecy, you also have that level of secrecy where you have a lot of school staff that turn a blind eye on situations that are clearly alarming. And in France, we do not have this culture of athletes and college sports and things like this. But I've been living here 11 years, and I understand it well enough to know that a coach will protect his team. And I think toxic bro code that has been created a long time ago, and it exists even more. let's just assume that the school is not going to be the one that will tell you that there is an issue. I mean, as parents, we definitely need to be proactive in active listening and taking action.
Yeah. So I know you're not ready, Diana, to watch it, and that's okay. You have a little bit of time. But I would say that even just getting familiar, and the one thing that I don't think we could say enough right now, and I've talked to my girls, I don't even like it when they say, oh, I hate myself for this, or I want to kill myself because of this, right? Like, they say it and it almost feels like they're joking, and they're not joking, right? Like, you really, really, really have to listen to the words. If you walk away from anything from the show, is that the smallest thing could really mean the biggest problem. So I would say, considering the headlines, do have a conversation in terms of that there are options, that suicide is not the option. Have those conversations, those really hard conversations. They're not easy, but you may save their life or the life of a friend. You know, I love that now the mom of Hannah is more in touch with Hannah's friends than she ever was before. And some people would say, well, it's too late. But you know what? In my book, she's turning her pain into good, right? And so I am very in touch with my daughter's friends, and I make sure to praise them and to show them love, because you never know what kids are getting or not getting in their home. And if you can help, you know, save another life or impact them or give them the self-esteem that they need so much, that we tend to not even value, you know, that could help them, you know, get to another point. So I would say that the things to definitely walk away from is do talk about the hard subjects, right? Be their beacon, be their conversation piece, and definitely connect with boys, because I love, you know, Ludo, I love your about the male part in all of this.
Of course, I mean, it's. I think it's I actually think it's the biggest one, because bullying happens across gender, obviously. But I do think that, and the show shows you that this is a men's world right now.
Yeah.
For real. And so this is changing. This is a good thing. But what we need to also create is a different culture of masculinity. You know, I really like. I forgot the name of the teammate that basically quit the team, and I say, you know what, I'm out. This is not my family.
Oh, Zach.
Zach, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
So we need to be, we all need to be Zach, you know, especially if you've been popular in the past, or, you know, or you've had this image. Number one, it's never too late to change. I can tell you that. I've never harassed women or anything like that, but I can tell you that I was definitely fitting some of the men books attributes for a long time. And a lot of boys, we do that. We do that simply to survive, quite honestly, depending on the environment where you find yourself in. It's either you do that, or you get your ass kicked all day, and it's not easy, because in the show you can also clearly see an hierarchy amongst boys, you know, and the one that are at the top of the privilege chain are the most aggressive ones, they are the most violent ones, yeah. They are the most toxic ones. And I'm sorry to repeat it again, but again, look at who is president of the United States right now, and you will understand why we are in a situation like this globally, because what happened during the election is not an accident.
Right. I think that the best thing that we can do is, as my husband says, living in a house full of women, that his feelings have feelings. And that's the best thing, right? For all of us to be in touch and actually paying attention. So he says that, and yet, you know, he has made very tough, he has created very tough girls. You know, they could outdo superhero knowledge and outwit pretty much any boy. So I would say, you know, that the opportunity of our feelings have feelings means that we're just in touch, right? And that we're all paying attention, and we're being sensitive to each other. And the last thing that I do appreciate about the show is actually the diversity on the show is actually pretty good. You know, the fact that they're showing I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was agreeing with you. This is a great show for diversity, definitely.
Yes, yeah. So diversity definitely wins in the show, and that I can really appreciate that the issues are almost spread, you know, all the way around. So anyway, so we will bring this topic again. I appreciate you, Ludo, writing your article and bringing it to the forefront. You pushed me to watch again season 2, so definitely, you know, write to us and share your feedback, everyone. Take a look at Ludo's article. We've shared it on Los Tweens and Teens, and we will bring more of these. And we're going to be doing some surveys on topics that are important for parents raising older kids, because they do get out of diapers and then it all gets more complicated. And that's the reason why we created Los Tweens and Teens, was to help once they get older. It's actually easier. You will figure out that it's easier when they're in diapers and crawling than it is now. So ciao, everyone. Thank you so much from Miami and New York. We're going to say goodnight, and then we'll definitely share this and share your insights with us. Gracias. Ciao.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.